You don't put you don't transmit an inoculation inventory or a bedding inventory out of a incident command using voice. This is for written documents, which do impose their own kind of discipline. How do you coordinate a grid restoration without communication? Your landlines, your cell phone, your satellite phones, public safety land mobile radio networks, the internet, all of these are dependent on vulnerable, normally used infrastructure, which are all dependent on power, water, fuel, and people. Okay, so casualty events, the need for resilient communication. I don't think I have to tell this crowd what I mean by that. There are large and small daily and once in a lifetime events that occur that require this type of communication. I'm talking about cyber attacks, large and small. They have a very high probability of happening often. Earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, ice storms, wildfire, depending upon geography, cable cuts, other unintentional interruptions. They're very low profile. We don't hear about them often, but they're always happening. Electromagnetic pulse, severe solar events, that doesn't happen often as well, or any other impediment of normal email delivery is what I want to discuss today. More common than not, these have little or no notice. Some of them create extensive damage, depending again on geography and type, to critical infrastructure and communications, especially with respect to the internet. There's always significant timing issues with response to recovery. So, looking at landline, cell phones overloaded, no dial tone, no last mile, site damage, destroyed, no power, out of sync, sat phones overloaded, congested, no access, internet agency server, no last mile, your ISPs rebuilding or out of whack, backbone damage or destroyed, no email. That's the subject today, email. Public safety, your land mobile radio could be damaged, reduced capacity, etc. I want to talk a little bit about amateur radio volunteer resources. I don't know whether or not this group homogeneously uses volunteer resources. If you don't, it might be because they're limited due to competing or fragmented or unvetted volunteers. Disassociated for the agency due to no agency interest. For some agencies, it's not in your current plan. There's no training, no trust because of the past, problems with notification and attaining situational awareness when you request it. I'll talk about that a little bit later. What I want to emphasize here today is that it doesn't take a mass casualty event to cause problems. Here in the southern United States, North Carolina and South Carolina border, a farmer pulled a tractor over a AT&T long lines and cut the fiber, and this was the result. This is a FEMA report from Region 5 up in Michigan in the northeastern United States when the disaster took place in North Carolina in the southeastern United States. You notice California had significant outages, as well as the rest of the eastern United States from a farmer. We had a bombing here in Nashville where some nutcase exploded an RV over some cables coming out of an AT&T office and disabled many agencies for more than a week, as well as several common carriers. So the obvious history of disaster responses have really identified sustaining the performance of any communication essential function is dependent upon resilient communications. They have to be immediately available. They have to be infrastructure related regarding for significant periods. The resiliency is suited for additional training volunteer resources if the agency is willing to manage them. Can't have a third party managing employees, can't have a third party managing volunteer resources. So does the agency require that they must be vetted if you do use them? Do they receive any benefits? And I put that in quotes for their services. Anything from access to a little hat or a uniform or some appreciation given on a periodic basis. It's not required, but it just makes good sense. So why the need for auxiliary communication services? I think, and my experience is, when properly managed, the use of volunteer resources can be a huge benefit. They can do tasks that can alleviate the agency personnel from spending time on these same tasks. In other words, the agency can be doing things that volunteers can't do. Volunteers can put diesel fuel in tower generators. They can keep cash radios, batteries up to date. They can program cache radios. They can do all kinds of things that not just deploy, but they can do menial tasks so that the agency's employees can worry about things that volunteers can't deal with. To provide resilient communication with local land mobile radio, your public safety and other communication infrastructure is impeded or not existence, they can assist in that process if you train them. They can provide situational awareness or ground truth from all over your span of control on a very widespread basis. They don't have to know a lot about emergency communication to let you know that they have no internet, no power, etc. So what do they require again? To be managed properly and directly. In the United States, it's a wise thing if they have workers' comp and other liability coverage. They want access to the building so they can feel like they're employees that are not paid. They need to be trained in your, I guess you have a national incident management system or something similar, but they need to be trained in the processes that you use during emergencies. And they need to be trained about your agency. So again, in Canada, I don't know if you use the word, we have buzzwords here in the United States, and one of them is called a PACE plan. That's a primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency communications plan. And it's a PACE plan starts with your everyday normal method of communication and then ends up with two tin cans and a string. And my conversation today is to talk about contingency options or fallback methods when your alternate solutions are not adequate or too expensive. And of course, emergency last resort resiliency, which costs practically nothing, is rarely used and often forgotten because nobody has requested a $24 million or $44 million P25 trunking system that they have to spend 90 hours a week controlling and worrying about whether it works or not. So very little, because there's no financial burden here. There's rarely a lot of pressure to put this type of an operation in effect. It's like the burglar alarm. People don't buy it until after they've been robbed the first time. And we're not talking about a frequency or channel plan here. We're talking about a prearranged method to switch to other systems for communication. I hope you're bored and I'm preaching to the choir here. So the purpose of the group that runs the Winlink system is to support interoperable emergency communication by radio for security and emergency preparedness. We train people on amateur radio. They move from amateur radio to other services or stay in amateur radio. And our mission is to, our member agency is to support their mission. So what resources are required? We're talking about a radio station. We're talking about channels or high frequency channels or very high frequency channels and or ultra high frequency channels. And we're talking about operators that have been trained on how to use this system. So we're also talking about software that we provide at no charge on a Windows platform. We have a client program that has a screen that pops up about every 3 weeks if you don't pay our voluntary registration, which helps fund our operation, but it's not required. It's just if you wanted to help us out, it's $24. We charge nothing for our server application, which operates 24 hours, 7 days a week and scans channels. You must have internet access for the radio message server or the server option. You need to have transmitting and receiving hardware and an appropriate antenna. And you need trained operators, which I would like to say would be vetted volunteers, because hams already know a lot about what we're talking about. They just need to be put in the proper context for what it is you're using these radios for. This is not a hobby. Interoperability with Winlink is the key. Anyone can receive SMTP mail. In other words, we cross services. I'll give you one example. The state of California has just allocated $6 million for an high frequency radio program for its counties and watch points. There are 72 grantees currently. They weren't allowed to provide a proprietary vendor, so you've got this proprietary vendor who's got the best there is. And then you've got that proprietary vendor who has the best there is. And you have the third proprietary vendor that has the best products available and networking, digital voice, 3G ALE, everything you could want. Stenag protocol modems, but they're all proprietary and they don't talk to each other. So the state of California has adopted the Department of Homeland Security's shared resources Winlink system so that these people can talk to each other digitally. And also adopted the Department of Homeland Security's shared resources voice ALE frequencies so they can have their own statewide net and talk to each other regardless of the vendor. So that another example, if you're an amateur radio operator and you're on the amateur radio frequencies and under their rules and regulations, you can email anybody. You can email somebody on a commercial band where the commercial rules and regulations apply. And as long as each individual maintains their own rules and regulations and stay within their service, they can cross services. So you can email anyone with this system over radio. The purpose of this system is to provide access to the SMTP mail system when you have no other means, or if you have other means and they're otherwise occupied. You can imagine in your where this could be used. Okay, so there's no service fees, there's no usage fees, there's no software license fees except that little volunteer $24 for registering a client email product that we provide. The minimal cost can be shared by volunteers. They love to use their own equipment. The cost of a typical station is less than one Motorola P25 trunking handheld. And I guess I'm the only vendor that you would have that's not monetarily motivated, if I'm a vendor. So what's required specifically? Well, there's a drop kit. I would put anything that you do with us either in a mobile situation or a portable situation, because you never know where you're going to have to move it. I put a drop kit in here with the National Guard, a demonstration before Congress from TSA, in Idaho National Labs, and the American Red Cross headquarters. There's amateur radios there. There's commercial radios there. By that, I mean the RFCC has a Part 90 type acceptance that is, in my opinion, a lobbied effort by Congress, pressured by huge corporations that provide that kind of equipment. You need, this works on VHF and UHF. If you're in downtown, wherever, it's very difficult to use HF radio. So this works as well on VHF and UHF channels. You need a transceiver, you need an antenna, you need a power source, and you need housing. Power is minimal. 12-volt battery from a car would run this thing for a half an hour. A UPS would run it. A generator obviously would run it. Solar power. There's no infrastructure needed between originators and recipients on this system. You can cover nearby areas all the way up to thousands of miles, depending upon the specific requirements necessary for you to find your internet email. Even with public safety land mobile radio in full operation and with no emergency, email may not be available to you when you need it. And that's when Winlink becomes valuable. I want to show you the Department of Homeland Security Cyber Infrastructure Security Agency Shared Resources Winlink High Frequency System. These are servers, and they scan 5 separate frequencies that cover the United States. So each one of these receives information from an end user, or if an end user is mailed, they stay on this system until an end user picks it up, just like with your standard email and your servers. You can use Telnet to automatically poll this thing continuously, or you can use radio when you need it. The little H you see in there is a mandated option that we had to provide for the Department of Homeland Security. If the internet disappeared everywhere and there was no internet, this will act as a large mesh network, and it has heuristic algorithms that deal with time of day, propagation, etc. And it will, if I'm 8 miles from the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency, I can go over radio to the Emergency Management Agency. If I want to send a message to Robin Lou and the Oahu, Hawaii EMA on Diamond Head, I can do that with no internet. It just hops, skips, and jumps until it gets there. So you have 2 general modes. So I'm going to take one of those little green servers, and I want to show you that in 30 days, this is the client or the end user community that is been used in the last 30 days by the Williamson County, Tennessee radio message server that is in their hardened facility. So these are the users that have, without it, most of this is not any emergency. This is just standard check-in, practice, whatever. I don't know what it is, but I don't think this dealt with an emergency in the last 30 days. It may have. It could be exercises as well. But this is the user community for that one RMS, radio message server. And as you saw previously, there are quite a few of those radio message servers available. In fact, this is an old map. There's many more. Okay, so what does all this mean? Let's say that you didn't have any internet, or let's say that you had a cell service that was out, or let's say that your voice over IP was out, but your plain old telephone service, your POTS lines were still available, etc. We have a myriad of over 150 templates that produce an HTML formatted, in other words, it looks like the form that it is, templates that we send over this, and we invite any agency to provide that information. If they have a form that they want to put on this system, we've got many forms. Many states have forms. Many federal agencies have forms. Many medical institutions, hospitals have their own forms, departments of transportation, etc. We have all the US ICS forms and its command system forms on our client system, and they are all available. This is a situation report. This report goes in. Each state of the 8 states in FEMA Region 4 send this report in once a month to the FEMA Watch, the Federal Emergency Management Agency Watch in the region, so that they maintain their radio equipment and their communication with FEMA. And it contains a lot of information. In this particular case, for this particular exercise last June with FEMA Region 4 and Region 6, they tested the FEMA National Emergency Radio System. They tested P25 networks by taking statewide networks and connecting them together. They tested G2 SATCOM. They tested the National Warning System, NAWAS, and they tested Winlink. They wanted to use the Department of Homeland Security Winlink only, but they wanted information from all over their region. And I begged them, and they finally agreed to use amateur radio to give them a chance to show what they could do. And I'm going to show you what they did. So if you look here, there were 4. If you see that the red means no internet in this particular situation. So this is what that particular form looked like on the left. That's what it looks like if you receive it. On the right, if you get it as an email, that's what it looks like as a text-based format. And on last June 1, during this exercise, we had over 1,000 people participate in this exercise using Winlink. And the results were what they wanted to see. If you notice, I wanted to bring this to your attention. There's one state that doesn't use volunteers or doesn't use this facility. And so that state had 0 reporting. Okay. Everybody else reported. Texas was in the middle of another exercise. New Mexico was having wildfires, but they still reported. And if you look underneath there, you can see in this particular map, it doesn't show it very well, that the 4 cities, Little Rock, Arkansas, Dallas, Texas, Miami, Florida, and Charlotte, North Carolina, did not have internet. They had been cyber attacked. That was the exercise. And the reason for doing the rest of this was just so that those people could see where what effect that internet had. If you remember the farmer that ran over the fiber, or the bomb that went off in Nashville, or a myriad of other incidents, both known and unknown, you know that damage occurs in more places than just where you saw it or where it happened. So that's the results of this. Now, in addition to that, you can see that no internet was shown in red. And this is the Dallas end. Okay, so during this exercise, the state of South Carolina, the South Carolina Emergency Management Division, used their ArcGIS because we provide both a CSV file and an KML file to provide to GIS departments so that they can map this up against their in their pit or their main facility next to Web EOC, which is also on the wall, listing events as they occur. They also took our output as these came in and put it up so that they could see it on ArcGIS. So this is their version of that. They built this thing in a day. I don't see how they did it, but they did. And this is the results. You look over here to the far right, and you can see why there was no markings in that state. The rest of the states really provided in accordance with their population that are in these two regions. That's Texas, Florida, North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kentucky, South Carolina, New Mexico, Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi. And this was the emergency detail that they brought in. You don't care about that, but it is recordable and it is available. So we also, I don't know what you do, but when an incident occurs and there's communication, we keep a log of all entries that came in, because you may have one individual that didn't have gas line and you want to find out how severe that is. So you call that individual up on the telephone and you find out how bad that was or whether it's widespread or not. So each one of these entries that you saw is recorded in a log file called a Form 209. I don't know whether Canada does the same thing or not, but I'm sure they have some sort of log file, whatever it's called. So that's everybody that participated in that exercise, or if it was a real event, that would be listed to the frequency list of the 205, and that would be in the hot wash and the after action report. So bottom line here, we're talking about a radio and a tuner and an antenna that costs approximately $1,600, talking about a particular protocol modem that works digitally that costs $1,800, talking about another type of software that works just as well, that's software only, that only needs a non-interleaved sound card, external sound card, that has bandwidth wide enough to handle this, anywhere from $55 to $250. But the ability to send email when other communication options are not available, that's priceless. And that's my presentation. And I thank you for your interest. And if you need anything from me, here's how to get hold of me. I'm going to mail that presentation to Scott. He's got about 5 versions. I'm going to mail the final version to him so that he can get this. And I appreciate it. And if you have any questions or time for questions, I'd be happy to answer them.